So that's the deal tonight. We're now going to focus on something else that's going on in the game in terms of the present and the future. But first, an introduction. 6-time Stanley Cup winner,
Yes.
Hockey Hall of Famer, lawyer, best dressed Canadian, 1979, 1986, a former member of Parliament, 3-time Hungry Hippos national champion.
Quite the resume. Yeah.
Produced 2 Triumph records. Some of what I said may not be true. It is Ken Dryden. Mr. Dryden, always a pleasure.
Yes. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you. We have whenever guests come by, we try and impress them as much as we can with great photos in all of our plasmas. One stuck out to Mr. Dryden. It's the one here, top left. You said you had a little anecdote with this one. What's the story here?
Well, I think that was maybe the 100th anniversary of the Canadians, and they wanted me to go back onto the ice with equipment on. And I hadn't had goalie equipment on the ice since the last game I played in 1979. And I had no idea. All I could remember was Aurel Joliette in the mid-'80s when he came out onto the ice for a ceremony and decided that he would skate. And by that time he was about 87 years old. And he could skate fine, except he didn't see the cord. And he tripped on the cord and didn't realize what he had tripped over, and he kept tripping, and the arena was aghast. And all I could think of was I'd pull an Aurel Joliette. So that is Carey Price's equipment. I rehearsed in that stuff at noon to make sure that I could stand up in it. And then I came out onto the ice with it. And one of the hardest things, and I'm there sort of, with my hands on the top of the stick, if you can see a little bit, the stick is angled forward because I couldn't do the lean on the stick with those gloves because they were so much bigger that I couldn't get my hands on top without hiding my head.
So you're telling me this grand celebration, you were nervous the entire, you didn't enjoy any of it?
Like
you were just freaking out?
When it was over, I was thrilled.
Can you join the team in time for Anaheim coming up? Too soon.
If I can score goals, maybe.
Yeah,
we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that.
We've all kind of seen your growth outside the game of hockey, and you started with a book that romanticized kind of the game and told stories about the game. Why was it important this time around to write this book? And that is, for those who haven't seen it, it's Game Change this time around. Why was it important for you to write this book about Steve Montador and his story and concussions?
Well, I mean, I think that it's just, it's funny. I mean, I never think of one book as romantic or the other. It's just the story that I experienced. So it was the game, and I was experiencing the Canadians and the NHL through the 1970s and tried to tell that story. Right. Late in the 80s, it was to try to connect the game with the country. And in a lot of ways, it was like what Ken Burns did a few years later with baseball. But it was hockey and life in this country. That seemed to be the story that, to me, hadn't been really gotten into, and it was I thought it was an interesting way of looking at the country and the game. And so this time it was like, I mean, I had no reason to write a book about any subject, let alone about this, except that it seemed to me that that brain injuries are the most significant issue in sports now and will be in the foreseeable future. And whether it's hockey or football or even soccer, rugby, lacrosse, anything where there are significant collisions, then it's a really big question. And so that's what I decided to write about. I mean, I had written articles about concussions, but then I thought, no, this is what you can't get at in an article really is the life of somebody. And the only way you can really understand concussions is in the context of a life. Who is this person? What was he like? Why does it matter? Why should I care about him? And so what is the real implication, and the consequences of head injuries?
Steve Montador passed away in 2015. Why should we care about Steve? What is the answer to that question?
Because I think that one of the things that surprised me, I didn't intentionally do it at the beginning, but Steve was almost an everyman kind of player. I mean, he loved to play, played all of his life, loved the action of playing on the ice, off the ice, in the locker room, in the gym, with his teammates. You know, he loved the competition. He loved being around, you know, everything about it. And he wasn't a goon. He would be involved in scraps here and there if he felt that was necessary. But that wasn't his game. I think that most people would recognize Steve, or you know, their own kids and grandkids and friends in Steve. That he wasn't an outlier in that way. And so, you know, that this was his experience. I mean, he played, and this is what happened. And when you have these kinds of injuries, and whether it's, you know, the smoking gun at the end of CTE or not, it's all of the other conditions along the way that are a problem. I mean, it's when you have memory problems, problems of depression, problems of anxiety, problems of kind of making decisions, putting pieces together. That's not a good thing to have when you're in your early 30s. That's something that you're not surprised at when somebody's 83 years old. But when they're 33 years old, that is not a good thing.
There seems to be a little bit of a pushback from some of the leagues on the link or the causation from CTE, even insinuations from the President of the United States that new rules were ruining the NFL, and that while most of us understands that these are businesses, some of these headlines, including Gary Bettman, who said in a 24-page letter to a U.S. senator that the relationship, at least was what I read, the relationship between concussions and the asserted clinical symptoms of CTE remains unknown. What is your reaction to the pushback that you see from leagues?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the Gary Bettman's point often in this is to say, I think that they pretty much recognize the condition. I mean, and the symptoms.
Right.
What they would dispute is necessarily the connection between what happens on the ice, and it's like, well, this could have happened, you know, when they were 2 years old and fell down the stairs. You know, why is it this? Why, you know, if you can't show causation, the actual line that connects the two, then what are we talking about? And I think that, you know, that is often the defense in it. Well, then, you know, that you or me or lots of other people, you look around and you sort of see these people that, what do they have in common? You know, that they are young, they are otherwise extremely healthy, and they have the kind of conditions that are very unusual, if not rare, in somebody of that particular age. And what they have in common is that they played these sports, these collision sports, and have had a lot of hits to the head, accidental, intentional, whatever the source, by elbow, by shoulder, by fist, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Now, at a certain point, you say to yourself, well, you know, that there's something more than coincidence here. There is something that's troubling. Mm-hmm. And one of the defenses that's interesting, that eventually, you know, that eventuates, is that, well, when science knows, then we will follow science. And the problem with that, of course, is that science actually never knows, because that's not how science works. All science can do is offer the best information that is available at any particular moment. Right. You know, we're always having new theories on things that we were sure that we knew that we don't necessarily know anymore. Right. And so anybody who's a decision maker on anything, what you do is you go on the best evidence that's available at the time. And so, you know, the best evidence that is available now is the fact that players who are playing collision sports are ending up with head injuries and brain injuries that affect their lives. And so that's where we are.
Is this type of story, even going down to youth hockey, is the threat going forward also, Ken, when more parents look at some of the headlines that we just ran, when more people consume studies and make up their own determinations with their kids? I mean, are we going to get to the point in this country where just a lot of kids, for this specific reason, never mind the financial, for this specific reason, are playing a lot less hockey than they did when you were growing up?
Oh, I mean, it happens already. And I mean, when I was a kid, that if you were a boy, chances are you played hockey of some, even if it was just ball hockey, but you played hockey. In part, it was because hockey was really exciting and really fun, but in part, there was nothing else to do. I mean, what other sports were we going to play in the winter? Basketball wasn't a big deal at that time. Volleyball certainly wasn't a big deal. What else were we going to play? What other activities? That music programs weren't really developed, dance programs didn't exist. What were the other activities? Now a kid has all kinds of possibilities, and parents are in making the choices or encouraging certain choices. And if you're a parent, I mean, that's the part of this, and I just got back from this writers' festival in Vancouver, and the people who came in line afterwards for me to sign their books, it wasn't a signing line, it was a storyline. Yeah. It was people telling their stories about themselves, about their kids, about their grandkids, and what any parent does and never stops doing is worrying. And among the greatest worries you have if you're a parent is that you don't like your kid to have a bad knee or a bad shoulder. What you fear desperately is that something happens to their head, because that's a lifetime impact. And so you're this parent, and you have a choice in front of you of lots of different activities, and lots of parents are making the choice of encouraging their kids away from hockey, and it's what is going to happen.
Sid and I have been talking about this subject for a number of years. It's near and dear to my heart, and the one thing that I used to say when probably now, like a podcast was 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago, we were talking about the fact that minor hockey would eliminate hitting. And when I first brought it up, people would laugh and or get mad. Right. And not as many people are laughing or getting as mad as they used to. Right. Do you think there's a point where there is no hitting in minor hockey until maybe the very last and highest step before junior or university?
I think it could be. I think that where the debate founders, in a way, is that most of it is about the age of body checking. And so is 12 the right age? No, it's 13. No, we should go back. And it's all about the age, and it's all about, what the past arguments have been. And so if you're against it, you say, well, it's not 12, it should be 13. Right. And so that becomes the question. Instead, and so it's all focused on the right number. Well, the right number doesn't really have to do with a number. It has to do with these injuries. That's what it is about. And so you say to yourself that in terms of body contact, when is the right point and for what kind of body contact, knowing what we are knowing about kids and head injuries and the impact of all of that. Right. I mean, I remember our son when he played in the first year of body contact. And it was unbelievable to watch. I didn't expect this, but for the first half season, they almost forgot the puck because they knew, well, they had to pretend, they had to prove themselves that I can stand up to it. I have to prove it to my teammates. I have to prove it to myself, and I have to prove it to my opponent. And it's like, well, no, this is at most a part of a game as opposed to the focus of it. But really, those are the kinds of decisions that should be determined by the nature of the consequences, which has to do with the injuries.
Right. Like, why would we ever attempt to rationalize our children getting brain damage for a game at 12, 13, 14?
Well, and one of the things that's so remarkable now, and it really is a recent change, is, just watching the games on television now, those guys fly, and they can handle the puck unbelievably. I mean, just the dexterity and the passing is amazing. And people are starting to notice that. Even 10 years ago, the players did not have the abilities to do all of that. Now it is there. People are seeing the exciting, possibilities that they never even imagined. Well, now you're 10 years old, 11 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old. This is your beginning moments, really, to become unbelievably skilled in all kinds of ways this way, to fly. And what you don't want to have happen is for that sense of freedom, that to develop the skills, to be interrupted by the possibility of just getting hammered. I think irrespective of the injury part of it, for the development of what today's game is, bring in the significant hitting later on rather than early on.
The one thing that we've faced is fatigue from people that we've talked to, and we're running out of time here, so I want to get to. It's not all bad news, and I sometimes feel like when you're giving people the bad news of things, or you're telling them the stories like Steve Montador, people shy away from it because it's too hard to deal with. To actually think that someone would go to these extents who was just like you, Sid, or I. What's the most exciting thing that you've heard in this kind of journey through?
I guess the first part of it is that who's tired of this? It's not parents. They're not tired of it. They're living with it. Who's tired about it? The media. The media is tired of it.
Fans.
Well,
and leagues that are going to sue because of it.
Oh well, but that's not really
We'll
fatigue.
get a lot of emails
That's not
from
really
fans
fatigue.
saying, "Stop talking about this."
Well, if
And not
you're,
parents.
if
I
you're
agree
a
with you.
parent, if you're a parent, you're not tired of it at all.
Yeah.
As I talk about, in the book, that in hockey there are absolutely answers. That's the part that's always exciting in it. If I'm Roger Goodell, I don't know what the heck that I would do in terms of hits to the head in the NFL. That you from Monday to Thursday, all kinds of talk about things that we're doing. All of a sudden, you turn on Sunday afternoon, and man, the hits to the head are unbelievable. In hockey, there are absolutely answers, and that's why the last chapter is by far the longest chapter, because it's here's how we go from here. That unless there's a solution, that in a sense there isn't a problem, because if you don't have if there's not an answer to a problem, then you don't even focus on it as if it's a problem. But and that's why the answer part of it is crucial. The rest is just awareness. And we assume, that if we offer the awareness, then the answer is right there and it gets implemented. It doesn't. But there are answers in hockey. That is the great news about it.
I have despite those answers, I have a feeling this conversation is not going to end anytime soon. No. But we do appreciate you coming by, Ken. And so you can come by regardless. We're going to talk about the Habs power play or lack thereof. We can talk about that. But this is an important issue to a lot of people, and the book is, let me get the title right, Game Change, the life and death, of Steve Montador and the Future of Hockey, written by a man who knows a thing or two about books, Ken Dryden himself. Ken, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are the Habs getting the playoffs or not? Yes or no?
Tough road.
It's good.
Tough road.
It's good. It's dodged. It's good. Ken Dryden.
Always away. Always away. Yeah.